Well, welcome to 7th grade Texas history. I'm so excited to be teaching Texas history this year. I started out my teaching career in Katy teaching Texas history, and I'm not from here, so it was a lot of learning for me to do. It's fascinating. Coming from somewhere else, I was always wondering why I wasn't taught this, because it's such an interesting part of U.S. history. So some things your child needs to bring to class every day in order to be successful for me. They need to bring a spiral of some sort. It doesn't matter to me if it's a 3-subject spiral, in other words, a great big one that they would keep for the entire semester, or if it's a smaller 1-subject spiral and they trade one out every 6 weeks. It doesn't matter to me. Whatever they are more comfortable with and whatever you are more comfortable with is fine by me. So 2 things go in the spiral. Well, more than 2 probably, but at least these 2 things. They're graded work, which I grade everything they do. So there's no point in asking me if what their work they're doing is for a grade. It's always for a grade. So when I grade that and give that back to them, they should keep it in that spiral so that if I make a mistake entering a grade in the gradebook system, they can come and show me, and I'm more than happy to fix that. And that's good practice going forward for them for 8th grade and for high school, because it's a safety net. Because if I enter an 80 and they've made 100, but they don't have anything to show me, more than likely I'm inclined to trust a student, but it's just best to have that piece of paper to show me where the mistake was made. And also we'll be collecting notes throughout the school year. Your child is going to be taking notes this year, and that goes in the spiral too. And then they will have something to study from when it comes time to take a test, for the 6 weeks test, for progress report tests, for semester exams, because semester exams are cumulative this year in 7th grade. I would usually grade their spirals once a 6 weeks, and I will be upfront with them about what I'm expecting to see in there, and I will give them a list, and it's not a stressful thing for them, but they do need to keep up with it. So our curriculum this year is Texas history, obviously, and we cover everything from early exploration all the way forward into the 20th century, into the late 20th century, actually. Probably the only reason we don't come to the 21st century more is because we run out of time. We also teach government and economics with that, though, because we are supporting the 8th grade curriculum as well, because your students will be STAR tested in social studies in 8th grade. And 7th grade is a good time to start getting them ready with some of those concepts. And that's important because they will not be hearing some of these things again in high school, so we need to hit them hard in junior high. And as I said before, if you're not from Texas, you might wonder why your child is spending a whole year studying Texas history. I can tell you firsthand, I'm not from Texas, but there is a whole unique section of U.S. history that if you're not from Texas, you probably didn't learn it. And so it is important for your child to learn this piece of U.S. history because it impacts a lot of what happens later on. And I'm not just talking about the Civil War, I'm talking about many other things that happen in the United States. So it is an important chunk of U.S. history. All right, our textbook is online through Canvas. And in the first week of school, we'll be reminding your students how to access that information, although if they have been in Katy ISD, most of them know how to access their textbooks and their information online through Canvas. And I also, on Canvas, in the calendar section, please remember, that's where I communicate, is in the calendar section. I try to post what's going on in class. So if I've handed out a piece of paper that day with an assignment on it, or if we don't do too many maps in 7th grade, but if I have a map assignment, I usually try to scan whatever it is and put that on to Canvas so that you can see and they can see what we are doing in class. And I have a couple reasons for that as well, for putting that specifically in calendar. I think it's a really good way for, at the end of the 6 weeks, the students to be able to look back and see, what did we learn this 6 weeks? And if I have notes, and I usually do notes in a PowerPoint, much like what you're seeing here, sometimes I will have a screencast with them, much like what you're hearing here. I will post that on Canvas as well, so that they have a running record of what happened in class. And so even if your child is absent, they can still see, usually, what went on in class when they were gone. Also, we're going to be doing some flip lessons this year. And so there will be information posted on Canvas that they need to address in advance. A flipped lesson is when your child is responsible for learning something at home at night and they don't have to look it up. I'm posting it for them on Canvas in the calendar section, and then coming to class the next day, and we will be doing some sort of activity with that information, whether it's group activity or a writing response or whatever it is, but they need to do the work in advance, okay? Now, you might say, well, Mrs. Butts, how will we know whether there's a flipped lesson or not? Because you might not know if it's coming or not, but I will always post it in the calendar section of Canvas. Your student will also need to bring a red grading pen to class every day. A set of colored pencils is helpful. A glue stick is helpful, although I don't care if your child glues or staples or tapes their things into their spirals. It doesn't matter to me. I'm going to be upfront. I do not keep supplies in my classroom of any great quantity for students to use. They are in junior high school now. It is not too much to expect of a 7th grade student to be able to bring a notebook and something to write with to class. So I really don't have those things in my classroom of any great quantity. I have some colored pencils that I've gathered over the years up off the floor and things like that, but I do not have sets of these things in my classroom. And I expect your student to come with what they need to be ready to start class. So the flipped lessons will not be an all or nothing approach. And some lessons will be flipped and some will not, but you'll always know in advance. In Canvas, I usually have an overview of what's going to go on for the next week. As soon as I meet with my teaching partners, I will go back to the classroom and I will set that up, an overview of what will happen for the next week. And then I will post on the day that it's going to be flipped, I will post information. So you could then just go in there even in advance if you wanted to say, okay, there's going to be a flipped lesson on Wednesday. Could I look at it on Monday? Well, you probably could, because, I mean, who's going to stop you from looking at it in advance? Probably no one. So if it were up there, you could actually look at it in advance. And again, I will usually post any handouts we have because I just do. It's easier to keep track of that way. That way, if a student says, hey, I don't have it, I'm just going to say, well, you can print it. If you get home from school and you don't have it, you can print it. I assign very little homework. I just would rather have the students do the work in class. But even still, they are still only junior high students. They might forget it. They might leave it on the bus, that whatever. Just know that if I've handed something out in class, I usually scan it, and it is on Canvas in the calendar section. Last and most important, please feel free to contact me at any time about anything, whether it's a concern for school or something's going on at home that you're afraid might impact their school. Shoot me an email. Email is easier for me, and more communication is always better. Your child's education depends on 3 things: you, the parents, and them doing their part, and me doing my part as a teacher. And we can't do that if there's no communication. So I am certainly not one of these teachers that doesn't want to hear from you or your child. I really encourage the students to email me as well if they have questions. I try to check my email every night before I go to bed, which honestly is very early. I'm worse than a little kid. But I try to check it before I go to bed. So please, please contact me with anything. Sometimes I won't be able to answer you right away, especially if you would like me to call you. I can't. That's kind of hard for me to do. But if I can just email you back, I can usually do that if students are working in groups or something like that in the classroom. I can get back to you pretty quickly. Sometimes I won't know the answer. And if I don't know the answer, I will just be honest with you, and I will say, you know what, I don't know the answer to that question, but I'm going to work on that. And you can expect to hear back from me either by the end of the day, by tomorrow morning. Well, I'll give you a time frame. But please, please, always, always contact me if you have any questions about anything. And sometimes the students do. They will contact me and say, hey, Mrs. Butts, you were going to post that on Canvas. Did you slip up, or what's going on with that? And they'll contact me and let me know that I have just, forgotten something. And that's okay. I want them to do that. I want them to feel free to contact me. I'm so excited to be teaching Texas history this year. I taught a split like this a couple years ago, and it was a very fun year for me because it breaks the day up for me. Again, please contact me with anything, and have a great school year.